And then kind of moving into some of the skill positions, running back's another one that's, probably the most solidified, I'd say, on the roster because you have Hassan Haskins returning, the leading rusher, had over 600 yards last year in just 6 games. And, he is going to be a guy who, is kind of that versatile, like kind of more of a freak athlete type of guy where he's like jumping over guys and whatever. Then you have the freshman coming in, Donovan Edwards, who's more of a true just running back. He's got that speed, and that's what a lot of guys have been saying is he is really showing that speed in practice. We talked about him quite a bit when he was choosing between Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, and Michigan, and chose Michigan on signing day. So he's looking good. Blake Corum in his second year, I think they could move him to the slot at times as well and move him around. He said he's willing to do whatever when we talked to him yesterday on a press conference. Wide receiver, continuing to go down the positions. Giles Jackson transferred earlier this week. And, he was the third option last year and, started at slot, I think, in 5 games. Not a huge loss just because of the fact that they do have a couple guys behind him at the slot position, like A.J. Henning. You could even probably throw Xavier Worthy, the freshman, coming in at that spot. He returned kicks and punts, had 2 kick return for touchdowns in his career, but I think you could put Blake Corum back there, and that's what they did when Jackson was hurt last season. So I kind of like the receiving core. I think it's solid. It doesn't have that top line type of guy, high level type of talent, like what Nico Collins would have been last year if he didn't opt out. But Ronnie Bell is the guy to know there, clearly. And I think a couple young guys could emerge as well. Cornelius Johnson, we saw some flashes from him last year. And then to wrap up the offensive side of the ball at tight end, I think is probably one of the more unproven position groups on this team because you lose Nick Eubanks to graduation. But Eric All is a guy who has limited experience, but I think a ton of upside. Louis Hansen is a true freshman that's coming in that it wouldn't shock me if he gets some time as like a second tight end, if they go with some 12 personnel. So that's basically where the offense stands. And from what we're hearing, the offense is quite a bit ahead of the defense, I think, which is to be expected because, 1, the defense was really bad last year, and 2, they're installing a completely new system under Mike McDonald, which, we can talk about some of that personnel as well.
Blake Corum got a couple carries against Minnesota, I remember, in the opener, and much was made about that he could be a guy that would break into the lineup, that would get some looks and looked good early, scored a couple touchdowns, caught 5 passes for the season. Is he getting a little bit buried in regards to Donovan Edwards maybe taking over that complimentary spot behind Hassan Haskins?
I don't know. I think, I don't think so. I think that there's going to be a role for Blake Corum. He's not necessarily the traditional running back. The funny thing is he's actually the stature basically of Mike Hart. He's 5'8", 200 pounds. Mike Hart, his senior year, was listed at 5'9", 202. Mike Hart obviously came back this offseason as the running backs coach. So, he's probably, learning some insights there on what to do. They see at the same level, Mike Hart being the all-time leading rusher at Michigan. So I think there's going to be a role for Blake Corum. And like I said, whether that is, an every down back, that's a possibility. I think that he could be kind of the guy that comes in on third down. We've seen him. He works really hard at pass protection despite being shorter. Sometimes the shorter, smaller guys are actually better at pass pro because they can move a little quicker and just get a piece of somebody and, save a sack. I think Blake Corum could be that guy. We saw him, like you mentioned, on the first play of the season on offense was a swing pass to him for 24 yards against Minnesota. He scored a touchdown against Michigan State, 1 other touchdown on the year. So, no, I think there's going to be a role for Blake Corum. I think that there's also going to be a role as more of that traditional backup for Donovan Edwards, especially if he is as good as advertised, which is exactly what we're hearing right now. So, yeah, I don't expect them to go with a complete, equal running back distribution at this point. And, like they did last year, which was one of the bigger storylines that everyone was complaining about. But I do think all 3 will have a role, and you see that with some of the programs around the country as well. It's not necessarily going to be equal, but I think that they'll all have a role.
And again, definitely Ronnie Bell's the man at wide receiver, 82 catches for his career. And that's where they stand there. Giles Jackson, of course, maybe a bigger loss in the return game where he had a couple touchdowns in his career returning kicks.